Today we are taking an overlook of my game, Adventures in Platnium, which I've been developing for about 2 years now. So yeah, let's just jump to the time machine and get to the end of 2018, where our fabulous story begins. I started working on Adventures in Platnium in October of 2018. When I started, I really didn't have any clear picture for the game other than that I wanted to make a 2D side view platformer, which was something that I hadn't done before and hadn't experimented much with. I thought back then that this project would be one of those throwaway projects which would just go to the trash bin, but now we know that it wasn't. From this first few months, I don't really have that much documentation to show. 1 week into development, I had some really basic level loading from a really simple text file, a basic platforming player controller, and some simple enemy combat. This was a solid start, and I slowly tinkered around with the project for a few months. I actually started documenting the project in a bit more detail in January of 2019. At this point, the concept of the game being a platformer was already completely tossed out of the window. All of the platforming elements were gone, and at this point the game could have probably more been described as a 2D side-scroller. The movement between levels was really restricted, as the only way to actually change levels was to move on the side of one level and then automatically get transported to a predetermined level. January 2019 was also an important month, because that was the month when Cooler SK, the current main artist behind the game's art, joined the development team. Slowly but surely, we start converting some of my placeholder assets to original art, even though at this point there were still a lot of placeholder assets, including the background art of the game. At this point in the game's development, I had started forming some kind of vision for what the game was going to be. I had implemented more RPG systems to the game, for example a simple inventory system along with a shopkeeper system. Also, at this point of time you could only sell items to the shopkeeper. Then I also added some basic dialogue with NPCs, but which would later on be used in quests and background dialogue for the game. And there was some simple resource collection features. Resource collection is still a big part of the game, but it's definitely not as significant nowadays as I thought that it would be on the main game. So then we get to a point in development which I like to call the Growth Spur. This was time when I was adding a lot of new features to the game, still doing a lot of experimenting. The bad thing during this time was that I was pretty much just throwing together features without giving much thought on how they would affect each other. And because I really didn't have a clear picture of what the game would look like in the future, I wasn't really planning ahead with those systems. During this time of development, I actually added a really important and defining system of the game, which was the world map. Adding the world map made the game feel a lot more open world-ish, where the player could travel wherever they basically wanted and wouldn't be just limited to the linear style what the game was in the past. During this time I also added the quest system and a lot of other features. Some minor, some bigger, but overall this was a huge time of growth for the game. So after a while of just adding a lot of new features to the game, I had for many months said that I would be doing a playtest soon. So the systems of the game would actually be tested out, and we would see if the game was actually enjoyable in a state that it was currently. I felt like I couldn't finish the playtest without setting myself a deadline, so I gave myself a month to work on finishing the game and wrapping it up to a state where it could actually be presentable. So I started working on the preparations for the playtest. But the problem that I faced was that because of the way I had just barely scrapped together a lot of the game's features during the Growth Spur, it proved to be difficult to add many of these systems I wanted to add before the playtest. So during the preparations I basically had to rework and redesign a lot of the systems for the game. So the deadline started to creep in faster and faster, and I was scared that I wouldn't make it. For the last week of that 1 month period, I pretty much worked all day, every day, and barely managed to finish everything to a state where I felt like it was presentable. The playtest itself went by really fast. I hosted it on the game's Discord server and opened up a bug reports and suggestions channels where people could give their feedback on the game and report any bugs if they encountered any. So after a few days we had collected about 10 bug reports from various people. The feedback itself was pretty positive, and it was really great for me to see that the people were actually enjoying the game. After a few days since the playtest started, I released a small build which fixed all the reported bugs, and then after a few days I closed down the playtest. The period leading up to the playtest had completely burned me out, and I just needed to take a break from game development and programming and the project overall. My break lasted for about 1 month, and I was just generally feeling really burned out. During that month I spent a lot of time thinking about what had led to the burnout and kind of identifying how I could do things better in the future. This was also a time when another developer called Thin Matrix released one of his first devlogs of his newest project. On the video, he explained his thought process on starting to work on a new project and how he was going to proceed in the first stages of the development. I came to the realization that my burnout was pretty much caused by not really ever thus far having any good milestones in place. I had mostly just spent time developing the game, not really planning and just going with the flow and adding whatever I felt was right in the moment. After I felt I had regained the energy of continuing to work on the project, I set myself some milestones that I wanted to finish before the next playtest, milestones that I wanted to do for the next few months. I started doing a lot more planning than what I had previously done, and this actually proved to be a really good way of doing the development. I always knew what I was going to work on. I felt much more productive, and I really, after this point, I haven't really had to rework that many systems because while working on these systems, I tried to keep in mind what kind of systems would come next. Of course, the plans have been changing along the way, but following a good plan for the development has really been something that has really increased my overall productivity and just the enjoyment of game development. I probably wouldn't be this far in the development if I hadn't seen that video from Thin Matrix and gotten inspired by his way of planning and working on the new project. So yeah, I just want to say thank you, Thin Matrix. that video really helped me. For the New Year's, I strictly followed a plan I had set myself and actually finished quite a lot of systems. I imported Unity's new lightweight render pipeline, which basically allowed me to add some simple 2D lighting. I also added a day and night cycle and interiors to buildings. So then we come to the year of 2020. I continued using the workflow that I had created myself, which was just following a set plan and updating that plan every now and then. Yeah, that went really well. Until in February I started work on companion system. The companion systems basically allowed the player to team up with NPCs to help in bigger fights and also be a part of the quests. Because this system was so dependent on so many other systems working fine with it, I had to rework a lot of the old systems, and I really hadn't faced this kind of reworking period in about half a year. since before the Playtest 1. During this time of working on the companion system, I felt really unmotivated to work on the game. There were periods of time where I would even spend a week without even working on the game at all. I felt like there was almost no progress happening, even though in some days I would put 8+ hours into the game and still feel like I hadn't actually achieved anything productive. But I managed to push through this period, and the end result of having the finished system was really one of the most rewarding feelings that I've received in the entire time of working on this project. This was definitely one of the biggest systems that I had ever created, and it taught me a lot, and I feel like I've gained a lot of discipline skills and experience from working on this system, because now I kind of know, even though I would start something big, I am always able to finish it, and now I've built the trust on myself to actually be able to work on bigger systems and actually finish them. After the companion system was finished, the progress was once again kind of catching up as I gained more and more motivation to work on the project. I started outputting a lot of the new features, and suddenly I started noticing that the plans that I had set for myself for the next playtest were actually getting pretty much fulfilled. This was around May of 2020, when I finally decided, okay, I am going to host the next playtest, and I set about a month for myself to work on wrapping up the project to a point where it could be once again representable to the playtesters. This time I felt really confident in myself, because I knew that the game was almost ready for playtesting, and I had the confidence in myself that I wouldn't get burned out this time. So at this point we had about 2 regions. I had almost finished all the quests for the second region, and I felt really confident in myself that I was able to finish everything by the deadline I had set myself for the second playtest. I managed to finish everything in time, and even more. I was really excited on what the playtest would bring. There were at this point about 18 quests in the game. Actually, the first person who was first to complete the first playtest build of this playtest round was the artist of the game, Puller SK. He took about 2.5 hours to actually finish the game itself. So many people trying out the game, and so many awesome people giving feedback. And actually this time we released 5 builds during the whole playtest, which was just crazy. We received so much positive feedback from people, and I had such a fun and great time just fixing issues, responding to people's questions on Discord. And compared to the Playtest 1, where I had completely burned myself out, this time I was actually, even personally, just loving working on the game and fixing the bugs that were reported and talking to the community. And finally, we have arrived to the present. It's been quite a journey and quite a road down the memory lane. I will address the future plans of this project in a future video, so if you are at all interested in the future of this project, then feel free to subscribe to the channel. Also, there is an active Discord server for the community to hang out at platnium.quackbondgames.com/discord. The link is included in the description. I also do development streams 2 times a week, every Monday and Thursday at 2 PM UTC. Also, link to those is in the description. Thank you so much for being a part of this journey. I know that this was a long one, but I really appreciate you being here and checking this video out. Have a absolutely fabulous rest of the day. Peace.